Then, good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome you here on the O20 and NSP webinar on the topic of environmental issues and tobacco. Before we start, I would like to address some organizational issues that I would like to everybody to follow. First of all, please enjoy our wonderful presentations made by our wonderful speakers. Second of all, please mute yourself during the speaker's presentation. And third, do not hesitate to ask questions. However, please do that in the delegated time frame for the questions. You can do this with two options, either writing the question in the chat and I will read it out, or raising a raising hand button, and if you would like to address the question personally. So today we have 5 different speakers with very different and very interesting backgrounds, and who will differently look at the relationship of the environment, tobacco, and public health. First of all, we will listen to Mr. Cristian Bușoi, who is a Romanian member of the European Parliament and the current chair of the ITRE committee, um, as well as the member of the Conference of Committee Chairs, who will give us a brief presentation on the topic of added value of the Green Deal on public health. Consequently, our second speaker will be Professor Thomas Novotny, who is an emeritus of epidemiology and biostatistics at the San Diego University of the School of Public Health. Professor previously worked as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health in the US Department of Health and Human Services. Moreover, in 2010, he founded the Cigarette Butt Pollution Project, a research, educational, and advocacy nonprofit organization that addresses tobacco's impact on the environment. Professor will give us a presentation on the topic, the life cycle of tobacco and its impact on the environment. Our first speaker today will be Azadeh Zarakar. Azadeh is currently studying PhD in environmental planning at the University of Tehran in Iran. Azadeh founded ZISTA, the first interdisciplinary student association of the Faculty of the Environment at the University of Tehran in 2014. The presentation topic will be how to raise awareness on the subject of environmental impact of tobacco. After we'll have a short break. However, the fourth speaker for us will be Dumitru Silviu Mihail, who is a medical doctor at the Marius Nasta University of Pneumology in Bucharest. Dumitru's daily activities include work in the respiratory endoscopy unit, where he helps to diagnose pulmonary cancers and other pulmonary diseases through the bronchoscopy. He will present us today an interesting paper on the topic of smoking, air pollution, and their impact on lung development. Last but definitely not the least, our fifth speaker, Daniel van Kamhout, who coordinates the Belgian Alliance for Smoke-Free Society. However, before, Daniel worked at the Policy Research Department in the Flemish League of Families. There, Daniel was responsible for environment affairs, sustainable development, and energy. Moreover, her work has a particular focus on children environmental health rights. Daniel established and coordinated Childproof, the organization focusing on the child rights in EU. Her presentation will be focused on the mandatory due diligence initiative and the implementation of the SUP directive. However, the most focus today will be on the SUP directive and its environmental impact. However, before we start, I would like to give floor to Lydia and Karina, who will introduce the organizations responsible of the organizing this event. Karina, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for participating to this interesting webinar. So I will shortly introduce you the ENSP, the European Network for Smoking and Tobacco Prevention, which is an international nonprofit organization counting today 77 members from 38 countries. And among these, 22 are from the European Union and 16 are non-EU, but from the WHO European region. And with all our members, we are covering around 750 million people. So the ENSP's mission is to develop a strategy for coordinated action among organizations active in tobacco control in Europe in two directions. One, by sharing information and experience, and the other one through coordinating activities and joint projects. Therefore, the ENSP's vision for the future is to eliminate health inequalities among European citizens, and of course, their suffering caused by ill health and early death due to tobacco-related diseases. As for our youth group, in 2018, the ENSP announced the development of an ad hoc youth working group within the ENSP members. So during the past 3 years, what we do was to implement this group with additional members, and we continue to meet regularly online and face-to-face within the context of the other ENSP meetings in order to facilitate, of course, communications and promote youth-oriented initiatives within the European tobacco control activities. Our youth group now consists of 19 members from 8 different countries and produces advocacy materials from member organizations, position statements, fact sheets, specifically on policy measures curbing tobacco experimentation and initiation among youth, tobacco use, and the interaction between youth and human rights. So in short, this is our activity, and without further ado, I would let the floor to Lydia to present their organization.
Wonderful, thank you. Hi, I'm Lydia. I'm the Human Development Director at O20. So O20 is a political party that utilizes progressive pragmatism to achieve our goals. Of our aims, we especially value increasing diversity, helping students with housing, and connecting our students with jobs and internship opportunities. So we not only focus on matters directly related to university education, but also on important matters that will help improve students' prospects after finishing their studies and moving on to their professional careers. If you're interested in joining us, we have extended our deadline for candidate applications. And as always, we are constantly on the lookout for anyone to join as an active member. If this sounds like something for you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or contact us at hg@o20together.nl. On behalf of everyone at O20, we genuinely hope you enjoy the webinar this evening. Fabio, back to you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful introductions. However, I think we should jump in straight to the agenda, and I hope Dr. Bushoy has joined us already. So we can go straight to his presentation. Unfortunately, I do not see Dr. Bushoy for now.
Sorry, he is trying to connect now. Seems that the link is not working for him. I just sent to him again the link.
Okay. He is here now.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Bushoy. The floor is yours. We're all ears to wait for your wonderful presentation.
Hello. Finally, I was able to connect because I had also to register my name and my email address. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. Green Deal and public health are, of course, two very important union priorities, and then they are interlinked. It's very important to discuss this direct link between European Green Deal and what we try to achieve in the public health area as European Union. The Green Deal represents the political commitment towards climate neutrality by 2050 and the way forward to reach our climate ambitions. The Green Deal will have an immediate impact on the energy sector, on the transport sector, agriculture, environment policies, and also health policies, and will transform our union in a resource efficient one at the same time competitive. Of course, never forgetting that we should continue to assure growth. Health in all policies is an approach which seeks to mainstream health in all relevant policy processes and is a response to the cross-sectoral nature of public health policy making. Health and well-being is shaped by multiple social, economic, political, biological, and environmental factor determinants. And health in all policies and One Health approach recognize this. In the European Parliament, we firmly believe in these principles and emphasize them in our work. One example is the interlink between health in all policies and, of course, the Green Deal. The main focus of Green Deal will be to tackle climate change, and the benefit of this for public health will be enormous, as environmental and climate emergencies are major threats to public health. The climate emergency is a major challenge to public health. According to the 2015 Lancet report on health and climate change, systemic changes in ecological conditions and social dynamics will have far-reaching effects on human health and well-being as a result of air pollution, heat waves, floods, water shortages, infectious diseases, respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, undernutrition, and mental ill health. Therefore, the climate emergency is damaging the foundations of good health. And without accelerated intervention, this climate change and climate emergencies will come to define and impact the health of people at every stage of their lives. Tackling that climate impact will improve air quality in Europe. There are other opportunities for climate and health of phasing out coal or using the reform of the Common Agriculture Policy and the new farm-to-fork strategy to tackle emissions from the agricultural sector while contributing to a resilient food system able to achieve sustainable food and nutritional security are immense. Energy poverty is one form of persisting health inequalities in Europe, associated with a range of adverse consequences for people's health and well-being. Energy poverty is also one of the key sources of air pollution from excessive use of firewood, coal, and oil-burning stove for heat. Poorer areas and less wealthy member states are more affected by energy poverty. Adequate warmth, cooling, lighting, and the energy to power appliances are essential services needed to guarantee a decent standard of living and people's health. I'll finish by saying that coherence needed with the zero pollution strategy as well to the Europe's Beating Cancer plan, stressing that GHG emitting activities also emit carcinogenic substances. Likewise, mainstreaming climate adaptation into cohesion policy will enable countries to contribute to reach the targets of the 2030 UN Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, the well-known SDGs, reducing premature deaths in particular. Nevertheless, the COVID-19 crisis has clearly proven European Union's need for well-defined and adequately financed policy instruments and has revealed shortages, inefficiencies, such as in the supply of equipment in hospitals and insufficient medical human resources, has deepened medicine and vaccine shortage, has shown the need of digital tools and services that enable continuity of care and also need to maintain access to essential goods and services in times of crisis. As direct consequence of COVID-19, the EU proposed the Green Deal, which would become the Green Recovery, and of course the MFF. And especially, they established a new EU for Health program, the new health program of European Union, with a much bigger budget and many new goals with ambitious to transform our health systems, to make them more resilient, to support them towards digitalization, and also to create synergies with other programs like EU Beating Cancer Plan, Horizon Europe, and its special mission on cancer, the digital agenda, and RRF. As President of Industry Research and Energy Committee, dealing directly with the Green Deal, and also as rapporteur, as responsible for you for health, I will continue to try to promote the principles of good health, health in all policies, and of course to use all opportunities created by Green Deal in synergy with all the other programs and especially EU for Health in order to improve the quality of life of European citizens and improve the efficiency and of course the quality of health services in European Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bushoy, for your wonderful speech. Now, I would like to ask our audience whether anybody has any questions for Mr. Bushoy. If not so, I do have one regarding the air pollution plan of the European Green Deal. I would like to ask whether, because our today's topic is connected to the tobacco, and one of the thoughts that I had that in many European countries, indoor smoking is still a thing to exist. Will may it be assumed that the European Green Deal may somehow tackle the quality of air inside the buildings?
Just to unmute myself in order to respond to your question. Well, I know exactly what you are doing because I had the privilege to participate in many activities, and I also, as a member of European Parliament working in the health area, as rapporteur of many important dossiers on health, I totally support your work, and I believe that we should continue to manage the problem of tobacco use in Europe to, of course, improve the legislation, which is not bad, but should be improved. And but the revision of the Tobacco Products Directive is extremely important. And yes, we could put this in the context of Green Deal. Of course, Green Deal would like to see European Union space neutral from emissions in 2050 and a reduction of at least 55% in 2030. This will change significantly our energy sector. We will change the way we produce energy. We'll go a lot on electrification, and also we'll use the renewables in order to produce our energy. Not forgetting, of course, the security of supply, the need of affordable prices, and of course, to remain competitive and not to lose jobs. We'll change the transport sector because we have to go to the electric cars, and of course to use hydrogen for big trucks, for maritime transport. We'll see about aviation, how we can use on one hand batteries, but of course decarbonized fuels. We'll change the agriculture, and here the impact on human health is the greatest, and of course some industries. In a total coherence with this, of course, the environmental policies is looking a lot to the quality of air and to the pollution. And even that, of course, the strategy is concentrated more on what is polluted by human activities, by industry, and what is very harmful for human health. Tobacco use in closed spaces could be also included in this strategy, and we should continue to ban this. It happened, of course, in many European countries. I believe that this will be an indirect consequence on our environmental policies and health policies, but we should continue to fight to achieve this goal.
Thank you very much. Very fulfilling answer.
Thank you.
So if nobody else has any more questions for Dr. Bushoy, I would like to give floor to our second speaker, Professor Thomas Novotny. Professor, the floor is yours.
Good morning here in San Diego. It's, I know, quite a bit of a time difference, and I actually got confused a little bit about my starting time, but I think I've made it just about on time. I appreciate the previous speakers' comments about tobacco and its interaction with the environment. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about how tobacco, being a full service insult to the human body, as we all know, in terms of lung cancer, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease, it's also quite a bit of an insult to the environment on many levels. I don't have too much time today, but I'm going to share my screen right now and see if I can find my slides and put it onto presentation mode. And I've been working on this area of tobacco in the environment for the past 30 years or so, where we've looked at a number of different phases and aspects of it. Where we know is that the tobacco epidemic is still with us. There are 6 trillion cigarettes smoked globally every year, which means, you know, a lot of air pollution, but also a lot of environmental pollution on different levels. Many of these cigarettes are dumped as butts into the streets and beaches and parks and school grounds and everywhere else. What we need are some new and politically risky approaches to reduce the health and environmental impacts of tobacco use, not just the health consequences, but when we meld these two approaches together, we can add more power. What I want to say is that, again, the life cycle of tobacco is an insult to the environment. Tobacco growing is hard on soils. It's very hard on, in terms of pesticide use, but also deforestation, the woods used to cure tobacco, as well as just clearing land for growing tobacco is very hard on the environment. Cigarette production is a dirty process. The manufacturers produce carbon in terms of the production process, but also some of the chemicals that are used or actually discarded in terms of tobacco production are toxic. Cigarette transportation, I don't have to tell you about that. It's a global market where tobacco products are transported across borders, and the transportation costs themselves generate carbon. Cigarette consumption, as we just heard a little bit about, tobacco smoke is, as secondhand smoke, is the second leading cause of lung cancer, but direct cigarette smoking being the first leading cause of lung cancer. We also know that there's something called third-hand smoke, which ends up on surfaces of buildings, inside buildings, inside cars, where smoking has taken place. And we've now shown definitively that many of these things can have health impacts. That is just the exposure of especially young children to the third-hand smoke may in fact lead to health impacts, because they are absorbing the nicotine and other carcinogens actually from the smoked tobacco residuals. And then finally, what I'll speak a little bit more about is cigarette waste disposal. And this tobacco product waste includes the cigarette butts, which are, in the case of manufactured cigarettes, actually a plastic product. The filter is made of cellulose acetate, which is a plant-based plastic. And so this brings into consideration the EU's plastic directive that we can talk a little bit about later, but also the chemicals that leach out of these cigarette butts are toxic. And we've shown this in the laboratory to show that they can harm fish, worms, microorganisms, other kinds of creatures that are exposed to them. And so we've now focused a lot on this as a major environmental concern, because it has to do with the externality of cleaning up tobacco product waste all over the world, whether it's on beaches or in urban cleanups. It's the #1 product picked up during these cleanup activities. So land use for tobacco is grown in 125 countries. This may have some impact on food output because it's a cash crop, and people might stop growing food products even to feed themselves in order to get the cash that's readily available from tobacco. It's a very heavily profitable industry, not always for the farmers, but certainly for the manufacturers, and that influences agriculture upstream. This then may impact hunger and economic activity of small farmers, and it certainly creates unfair market conditions for them. Child labor is sometimes involved, or oftentimes involved actually, because these are family farms. Oftentimes children are exposed to tobacco. They may get exposed to the nicotine from the green tobacco, which then can create a toxic exposure. Green tobacco sickness is well known. It's been published about over the years, and it is something that causes neurological changes. It certainly is in the acute phase, nausea, vomiting. Nicotine poisoning is a real thing, and it is something that happens to workers who are unprotected. And again, small family farms throughout lower middle income countries are the places where this exposure will occur. The deforestation I mentioned, a couple 100,000 of hectares of forests are cut down for tobacco farming and curing each year. This then, of course, can lead to influences on the climate and ecosystem services. And this is a term that I think we should also recognize in our tobacco control advocacy. Ecosystem services have to do with what the environment provides to us, recycling, triggering. It helps to prevent flooding, aquifer depletion rather. And so it is, a larger systems impact when all of these impacts on the environment, agriculture, manufacturing, distribution, waste, et cetera, can have an inhibitory effect. And we're looking at this more closely here in California. The pesticide use I mentioned, and oftentimes pesticides, well, even nicotine itself is a plant pesticide. These are obviously acutely toxic chemicals that can pollute water and soil, and some even cause some ozone depletion. That includes methyl bromide. The degradation that I mentioned, because tobacco plants are hard on the soil, they degrade the soil actually, and it is something that beyond deforestation is something of concern to vulnerable areas that may be then susceptible to desertification and become unfit for food production. As I mentioned, the cigarette factories produce liquid, solid, and airborne waste. And in 1 year, this was considerable, 2.3 billion kilograms of solid waste and 209 million kilograms of chemical waste. So the process itself is dirty. Even when they made lower nicotine containing cigarettes, the nicotine from those cigarettes manufactured is dumped into the effluent from the manufacturing process. That alone is a toxic, hazardous waste product, nicotine. 6 trillion cigarettes, that means a lot of packaging waste, paper, ink, glue, cellophane, all the stuff that goes into manufacturing the packaging, which is not really ever going to be something eco-friendly. And this, again, is distributed globally, and distribution itself causing potential air pollution. So that we complete this circle of production and now use, smoking itself releases carbon dioxide and methane worldwide each year. These are greenhouse gases, and obviously then are linked to climate change as well. Secondhand smoke, as I mentioned, the second leading cause of lung cancer. It contains all of the same kind of chemicals that are in cigarettes, and 50 of these are at least known to be toxic or carcinogenic. So it's, again, an environmental concern, but we are pretty familiar with that one in tobacco control. It's the ones that are sort of outside our frame of reference in terms of behavior that we need to become much more, I think, cognizant of. Fires. This is another issue with the cigarette butts I didn't mention earlier. But they are a common cause of fire worldwide, not just the fires, but the matches that might be flung as a result of lighting the cigarette. And of course, these fires create millions and tons of gases and particulates, and it is a significant percentage of these fires that are created by discarded cigarettes, including here, at least in the United States, we've been able to show that that is the single most important cause of fire, cause deaths, is cigarette-caused fires, interestingly enough. And that's now led to some regulatory approaches. For instance, cigarettes are supposed to be, quote, self-extinguishing, meaning that in the past they were provided with chemicals in the cigarette to keep them burning longer, which means that it would burn more cigarettes and therefore sell more cigarettes. But if you let it go out, actually it protects against the potential for causing fires. Cigarette filters, again, this is cellulose acetate, poorly degradable. It can photodegrade over time under ideal circumstances. Ultraviolet light may help break it down, but the breakdown means that it becomes a bunch of microplastics. And this is the other concern that I think we have not yet embraced, is that cigarette filters are a source of microplastics. We don't know how much of the microplastics, which is now being measured throughout the oceans and many land sources as well, is due to tobacco products, but this is something that we can discover, and we're going to probably look at this in the near future as well. Nevertheless, the filter itself is not a health protective device. It is something that is there to sell cigarettes. It makes it easier to smoke. It discourages people from quitting because they think they're doing something to protect their health. And I think it should be banned. And this is something that we're undergoing a lot of discussion here in California about the actual possibility. Several bills have actually been put forward in our state legislature to do just that. They go from the street to the storm drains, to rivers, to coastal areas, back up onto the beaches from the oceans, and are, again, as I mentioned, this single most picked up item here in this list that is collected by the Ocean Conservancy every year during the beach cleanups. About a third of all the products picked up by count, not by weight, but by count, are, again, cigarette filters. We are also now seeing e-cigarettes. Up in the upper right-hand corner here are jewel pods, which are these little pods that attach to a USB drive sort of a device that then are disposable, even though they're plastic, as well as contain residual nicotine, which is a toxic hazardous waste product. And they may also contaminate our waterways and land. And this is another issue, not just from the jewel pods, but for things like the lithium ion batteries that are in all electronic cigarettes, which also have their risks environmentally as well. So the bud is toxic when actually ingested. This picture of the bird up in the upper right-hand corner was taken by an Audubon photographer, and it was actually found on the beach to be feeding his chick, or her chick rather, a cigarette butt. And kids, animals, pets are all indiscriminate eaters, and they are possibly able to absorb it. I mentioned third-hand smoke. You can see the picture on the left side where pictures on the wall of a smoker's apartment show the evidence. Again, the toxins are absorbed and they may cause DNA damage in laboratory animals at least. So what we hope is that there's more extended producer responsibility, that is, bring this back upstream, the responsibility and accountability for tobacco product waste to the manufacturers. This is a principle of environmental control that I think it can help us understand ways that we can regulate tobacco product waste, and furthermore, more other tobacco effects on the environment. So just in conclusion, again, tobacco is a full service hazard to human health and the environment. The cost of tobacco's impact should be recouped from the tobacco industry, whether it's through extended producer responsibility, litter fees, fines, lawsuits, changing the product, but they have not been held accountable. And it's up to us to clean up the mess and to prevent tobacco product influences on the adverse side on the environment. So anyway, I just want to call for new partnerships between environmental and public health groups and to help address this as a full service environmental problem, tobacco control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your rich for information presentation. And now I would like us to jump into the Azade's presentation, which is more relevant for us as a youth. So Azadeh, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be part of this webinar. And also I'd like to thank the former speakers. I will start with my presentation, which has the title, Empowering Students to Realize a Smoke-Free Campus, Why and How. Let's have a short look at the table of the content of my presentation. First of all, I'd like to start with with what Philip Morris International Tobacco Company stated in 1981. Today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer, and the overwhelming majority of smokers first begin to smoke while still in their teens. The smoking patterns of teenagers are particularly important to Philip Morris. I suppose without adding any further explanation, we can understand why youth and young adults are important to focus when we are talking about tobacco-related problems. In 1998, the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement was achieved in the United States, and they agreed on not targeting the youth under the age of 18 in their marketing practices. So the age group of 18 to 24 became the youngest legal target of tobacco industry. Also stated by American Lung Association in 2014, among adult daily smokers, 87% had tried their first cigarette by the age 18 and 95% had it by the age 21. So we understand why it's important to focus on this age group when we're talking about tobacco. The fact is that young adult population is a diverse community comprised of individuals enrolled in college. And when we want to talk about the smoke-free campus, we need to know about the tobacco use behavior of young adults, the frequency of use which can be daily, non-daily. According to the research, young adults smoke on occasional basis, and compared with older adults, young adults are more likely to smoke fewer cigarettes each day. Also, we need to consider that smoking initiation in the early ages is associated with smoking in the adulthood. In fact, college is a time of transition in a new world full of new social experiences that may include tobacco use and drinking. Sorry. So we learned about the necessity of focusing on youth when talking about tobacco, and also tobacco use behavior and the addiction which is established in younger ages. Also, we need to consider that the tobacco industry is actively studying young adult attitudes, social group values, and activities to learn how to infiltrate the social and personal environment of young people. Also, as stated by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, younger adult smokers has been the critical factor in the growth and decline of every major brand and company over the last 15 years. If young adults turn away from smoking, the industry will decline, just as a population which does not give birth will eventually decline. So that's why I mainly have focused on youth and the role of students on tobacco-related problems on campus. When talking about tobacco on campus, I'd like to mention that tobacco can be found on campus in different forms and in different places, like tobacco products, vending secondhand smoke, cigarette litter, and also you can find smoking in indoors, outdoors, residential halls, campus stores, and so on. The photos that you see, I have taken them in 2015 at my own faculty, University of Tehran, and this was the time that I started thinking about cigarette butts and smoking as a problem and how we can deal with it on campus level. Before going on, I'd like to attract your attention to some questions that you want to think about your own campus. I mean, how is the situation on your own campus? How serious this problem is? What tobacco products can you find on your own campus? Is smoking prohibited on campus or outside the campus? Is smoking prohibited in on or off campus residential buildings? Or is smokeless tobacco permitted in campus buildings? These are the questions that we need to think about before going on with doing something. And going on with the next topic is student advocacy. You may be familiar with these terms, but I'd like to say that student advocacy for tobacco-related problem is knowing the unique challenges and needs of your own campus, because tobacco issues differ campus to campus. So we need to think about how serious the problem is in our own campus. The regulations are different country to country, university to university. So as student advocates, we need to learn about the challenges that we have on campus, and then we need to provide tool and knowledge for individuals, and then bringing the tobacco issues into the culture and norms of the campus to create lasting change. To do so, we need to have a policy. Policy is, in fact, a mechanism to create a positive and lasting change. Usually, policies regarding tobacco-related problems have two objectives: reducing or omitting tobacco use on campus and decreasing secondhand smoke exposure on campus. Talking about policy, I would like to mention that there are four types of policy: administrative, voluntary, legislative, and regulatory. Voluntary policy is the one that I focus on when I'm talking about student advocacy. Voluntary policy can be an effective agent of change on college campus, especially where administrative and legislative policies do not exist or are not applied. So when we talk about student advocacy, in fact, we are talking about voluntarily adopting and implementing a policy. So to talk more practically, I'd like to talk about what we can do as students. So I myself was concerned about the situation, the cigarette butt, exposure to secondhand smoking. What can I do as a student? So I bring up the topic of organizing a successful campaign, which has 5 phases, and I will briefly explain each phase followingly. Well, the first phase is assessment and investigation, which has 3 steps. Step 1 is assessing and identifying the problem. Well, as said before, tobacco issues differ campus to campus. So we need to understand what the problem is on our own campus and how serious it is. To do so, we need to collect data, and the data collection has some methods like surveys, interviews, environmental scans. For example, you can interview with the head of the health office on the campus at the university, or with the head of the HSE office on your campus to learn about the problems and the population of the smoking students and so on. Or you can, by environmental scan, you can figure out who uses tobacco on campus, because it's not only students, but also staff, workers, visitors. So we need environmental scan as a tool to understand how serious and how big the problem is. Step 2 is becoming familiar with the campus environment. So we want to solve a problem. What is the environment of the problem? We need to learn about the size of the campus, how big it is, Is it inside the city or outside the city? And also how the buildings are laid out on the campus. All these information help us to adopt a policy which is 100% relevant to our topic, to our problem. And the last step is identifying campus and local resources. You may have some resources on campus like health center, which usually have valuable information, and also off-campus resources like NGOs that are working on this topic, and they are eager to cooperate with university and student associations. Coming to the next phase of a successful campaign is strategizing and planning. So you have the policy, you learned about the problem environment. Now you should have a strategy, and you can use a strategy chart for that, which I'm going to explain. And after having a strategy chart, you need to have a timeline to make sure that your steps are followed regularly. And also you need to be prepared for change. You need to be prepared for change. You may face barriers during implementing your campaign. So it shouldn't hinder you from following your goal, but you should be prepared, flexible. That's why we have a strategy chart and a timeline so that we can make sure that we are following our goals. Talking about the strategy chart, the one that I suggest is the one introduced by Midwest Academy, which consists of 5 columns. The first one is goals that for your policy, which may be 100% smoke-free campus. You need to set goals, short-term and long-term objectives. Then you need to understand your organizational considerations, which are resources, facilities, budget, internal problems. The more you think about these topics beforehand, the more successful your campaign will be. And also you need to learn about the earliest and opponents who are in favor of your campaign and why. And on the other hand, who are your opponents and how strong they are. And also you need to set targets, and for implementing your campaign, you need to have tactics, which can be petition drives, press release, flyers, social media. It can be anything creative and outside the box. It depends on your considerations, as mentioned before, the resources, budget, the team. So by having a policy and then having a strategy chart, we come to the next phase of campaigning, which is recruitment. So campaign is not a one-person show. We need to attract more volunteers or more students, even from workers and staff, to join us to support our campaign. So for recruitment, you need to have who you are looking for and what skills do you need in your team, and develop a recruitment plan, and then let them join you and then collaborate, which means that you need to make sure that older and newer members know each other and that their voice is heard. That is what that's guarantees the success of your campaign. Here it is. This is a flyer that I prepared for our campaign at the university. I know it's in Persian and you probably won't understand a word about it, but I just wanted to show that it can be simple, just telling about your goal and what you are looking for, and then your contact information. It shouldn't be anything sophisticated or special. Just make sure that everyone on the campus knows about your campaign and that you are looking for volunteers. The next phase is, in fact, implementing the campaign. So you had you know what policy you are looking for. You have the strategy chart, the timeline, and you have volunteers in your team. And now you should implement the campaign. To do so, you need at least 4 to 8 months for your campaign. You should also keep in mind that keep track of your success and challenges, save the media and share it with members and the supporters. And also celebrate every step of your campaign. It's really important just to let the others know that you have successfully implemented steps. And here you can see a couple of photos, which are different tactics that you can have for implementing your campaign. It can be petition drives, especially online petition platforms. They are easily accessible and you can spread them among all the students on the campus. It can be flyers. Just make sure that it's visible to everyone on the campus. You can just put them in the health center of the university and so on. And another tactic is chalking. You can draw on the floor, on the ground of the campus. However, you need to ask for permission beforehand. These photos are what we have done at the university. The left one is a flyer that we prepared and we mentioned that we are going to have a 100% smoke-free campus, and we talked about our goal. And the right photo is the amount of cigarette butts that I personally collected from the campus during a week. And this was, really shocking for students and workers. They didn't know that the amount of cigarette butts can be this much just in a week. So as said before, it can be anything creative for you. The last phase of campaigning is implementation and evaluation, as said. So during implementing the campaign, you should make sure that everyone on the campus is aware of what you are doing. Especially, it's really important to connect with faculty members, staff, and workers. And you can even ask them for permission to talk in the class. I mean, before their class, you can talk about your campaign for 5 minutes, just to make sure that every student on the campus is aware of what you are doing and aware of the policy that you are following to establish at the campus. And the last thing is evaluation. So you need to evaluate the process of campaigning. So you need to go back to your strategy chart and timeline and make sure that they are relevant. And also you need to evaluate the impact and the outcome of your campaign. You can use online questionnaires and distribute them among workers, staff, faculty members, and also students. These are the photos that we prepared at the end of our campaign, which lasts for 6 or 7 months. We put the sign that this campus is 100% smoke-free, and also we prepared flyers to put in different places at the university to make sure that everyone is aware that from now on, this campus is smoke-free and smoking is not allowed indoors and outdoors. At the end, I want to add that when a campus becomes smoke-free, everyone wins. In fact, it is a healthier and more productive workplace for everyone, and also it means decrease in cleaning costs. However, we need to think of smoking students that they also need help. I mean, we can suggest nicotine anonymous meetings to help these kind of students, or we can offer free cessation services for students who smoke and make sure that it is a win-win situation for everyone. And that's it. Thanks for listening to my presentation. And if there is any question, I'm glad to respond.
Thank you very much for your interesting and inspiring presentation. If there is any quick questions, we can talk about them now. However, I propose us to jump into a little 5-minute break. And after we return, we will listen to our two presentations that are remaining. Okay, I am super sorry for a little delay. However, right now we should go straight into Mr. Dumitriu's presentation. Mr. Dumitriu, the floor is yours.
Hello, today I'm gonna present a paper about smoking and air pollution and their impact on the lung development. So we're gonna talk first of all about the development of the lung, and we're gonna get familiarized with a few medical terms that will help us understand the content of the presentation. So the lung develops in many stages, in utero and after birth. We're going to talk about an embryonic period where the lung develops from the primordial digestive tract, and the lungs appear like a bud which expands outwards. And in this stage, we're gonna get a trachea and then the bronchus. In the next stage, we're gonna talk about the formation of the air vessels, the blood vessels, and the space between them, the new forming alveolar vascular membrane, which is the part of the lung that makes the transfer of gases possible. All of this ends in the fetal period, so in utero, but the lung is gonna expand and grow its capacity for ventilation and the gas transfer after birth. So it's important to understand that the lung doesn't stop growing after birth. So we have another period of maybe 10 years in which the lung reaches its maximum capacity for ventilation and gas transfer. In our world, we have many pollutants and other factors that injure our lung and our whole body. Most of them are known in wide categories as pesticides or as greenhouse gases, or infectious factors like bacteria and parasites or viruses. All of these have an effect on the development of the lung and on the body as a whole. So the air that we breathe in is very important for the development of the lung. It's like when you say that you are what you eat, also you are what you breathe. So in the modern world, almost 90% of people worldwide breathe polluted air. Of course, this is not the happiest thought, but it's a price that we all have to pay for the development of the world. So maybe your commitment to raise the quality of the air might lower the number, but for now, almost 90% of people inhale polluted air. At world scope, we have more than 500,000 children under 5 years who die from respiratory infections that are generated by outdoor pollution and secondhand smoke. So we're talking about infections that are possible only because we have this kind of pollutants in our air. The main pollutants are particulate matters, ozone, and here we have a big asterisk. We're not talking about the outer layer of ozone. We're talking about a combination of greenhouse gases with volatile components, and this mix under the UV rays generates ozone at the ground level. And the third big category is greenhouse gases, so carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. What are particulate matters? We're talking here about particles that are about 2.5 micrometers, so very, very tiny and fine particles that are inhaled. Our respiratory system is very well attuned to getting rid of particulates, but of course it's not perfect. So when we inhale particles that are bigger than 2.5 microns, they are stopped by the passage by the labyrinth that the air takes from the nose to the lungs. So in the nose and in the upper respiratory tract, these particles are stopped. If the particulate matter is finer than 2.5 than 1 micron, the particulars do not affect the lung as much, because they are expelled by exhaling, so they are not heavy enough to drop in the lung. But there is a perfect storm when we talk about particulates that are between 1 and 2.5 microns, because they are small enough to pass through the labyrinth that the air takes to reach the lungs, but at the same time they are heavy enough to deposit in the lung. Okay, now after we talked about what can injure our lungs, let's talk about how these pollutants actually manage to injure the lung of a new baby. So we're talking about direct influence through the amniotic fluid and placenta. So the mother breathes in the pollutants and the baby is affected. We are talking here about an increase in oxidative stress. So in any organism, we talk about an equilibrium between oxidative factors and antioxidants. So the pollutants in general increase the oxidative stress, and then we'll have a lower blood flow to the placenta and a lower transfer of nutrients to the fetus. So the primary effect is one of starvation. Let's say that it's not the perfect term, but I am trying to give you an idea of what's happening in the womb. So what are the effects? We have a greater number of premature births. We have a lower mean birth weight in children who that are exposed through their mothers to the pollutants in the air. We have impaired lung function and development. We have an increased mortality due to later respiratory problems, like we saw earlier. An overall higher infant mortality and an alteration in the immune system development. Then we're going to talk about children. so small children who are exposed to these pollutants, especially ozone, like we talked earlier. Um, the formation of ozone is directly linked with the amount of UV radiation. So we have a greater amount of ozone created in the summer when the children are outside and playing. So we'll have a greater exposure in the summers. I think that all of us went at the point in our lives near a busy road in the middle of the summer, and it's really, really hot, and we smelled the air that was a bit different than what we are used to. This is the phenomenon behind that weird smell. Okay, another way that children are exposed to pollutants is indoor pollution. And here we're going to talk about tobacco and biomass. So heating your home with wood or coal has an ill-desired effect on the development of the lungs. Again, I reiterate, the lung does not stop developing until the 12 year of life, let's say about 12 years. So what's happening? We have an increase in oxidative stress. So we have a greater inflammation in the body, and we have imperfect repair mechanisms to that injury. We have impaired lung structure, remodeling of the airways, and the result is a lifetime risk of asthma, COPD, and lung cancer. In the next slides, I'll show you some studies that underline what I said till now. We have studies that show a deficit in growth of a forced expiratory volume. So this is a parameter that describes the lung function. We don't need to get into details. The bigger the number, the greater the respiratory function. So we have a deficit in FEV1, where we have an exposure to greenhouse gases and to particulate matters. Further, we have a correlation between pregnant mothers and the FEV1 of their children. So mothers that are exposed to pollutants have children with a lower FEV1. Deficit in growth of FEV1 over the period of the follow-up were significantly associated with exposure to ozone, so summer exposure, let's say like that, particulate matter, and nitrogen dioxide. So the evidence is kind of clear that the injury to the lung is not only done in adult life, but also in childhood and in utero. Also, we have an association with asthma. So greater exposure to pollutants will increase the risk of asthma, which is rapidly growing in the developed world. Fighting asthma today is like fighting a tsunami. There are more than 300 million people with asthma worldwide. So we have ozone, which increases respiratory symptoms, which lowers lung function. We have nitrous oxide, which decreases the lung function, and particulate matter that also lowers the growth of the pulmonary functions. What about smoking? It's quite clear that we have the same kind of relationship between the intake of smoke of the mother with the lung development of the child. But more than that, we have an association with higher infection rates in the child, in the early life of the child. We have an association with a lower height of the child. So a smoker, a mother that smokes will have on average a child with a lower height than the average population, and subsequently will have a child with a lower respiratory function. So it's kind of clear that tobacco has an ill effect on the development of the child in utero, and moreover, when we talk about exposure of the young child, so after birth, we're talking about high toxicity from second-hand smoke and third-hand smoke. Which is particularly dangerous for young children. We're talking about third-hand smoke, because this small children are explorers by nature. They put everything in their mouth, they touch everything, and by this behavior, they're inhaling and ingesting trace amounts maybe, but cumulatively it adds up, amounts of nicotine. So third-hand smoke is especially harmful to infants who are exploring their environment. Maternal smoking encourages children to smoke, and their offsprings will have a personal habit, a personal relationship with smoking. So we're not talking only about exposure, chemical exposure, but we're talking about habits and a personal standard. Children whose mother smoked during pregnancy, I repeat, will have a smaller lung with a smaller capacity for ventilation and gas transport. The pathways are a bit complicated, but we're gonna talk, already known. We're talking about altered cytokines. We're talking about alteration in production of interferon gamma, and bias towards T helper lymphocytes, type 2 lymphocytes, which predisposes the child to asthma. In conclusion, when we talk about the health of our children, we must talk about tobacco smoke, and we need to talk about air pollution in general, because it's clear that there is a relationship between the level of contamination of the air and the health of the child. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your really rich for the information presentation. And I think we can go straight into the Daniel's presentation on the SUP directive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for my presentation. It was Karina who was going to share it.
Yes, in a second.
Yeah, sure. So let me start by thanking the organizers. Yeah, that's the one. Great. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me and to be part of this webinar on tobacco and the environment. I will share mostly some thoughts with you about the post-consumer part, so the tobacco product waste, and in particular cigarette butts and the EU legislation to tackle butts, which is the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive. Before starting the presentation, I would just like to say that within the Belgian Alliance, we have been following the developments on the sub-directive, and we envisage to adopt a formal position on the implementation of the extended producer responsibility part of the sub-directive in the months to come. I will come back to the extended producer responsibility a bit later, but we will still have some time because that only has to be implemented by the 5th of January 2023. And we are still waiting for the Belgian authorities to come out with several studies and actually so the policy that they are going to propose. So with this introduction, please go to the next slide. So we are very well aware about the health effects of smoking and passive smoking. And they are very well documented. The impact of the production and consumption of tobacco products in the environment is less and is often overlooked when we make policy. Although the Framework Convention includes a very specific article on the environmental concerns regarding tobacco. Next slide, please. Of course, we had a very well overview by Tom about the environmental impact of tobacco and the tobacco industry. I'm just putting here, so again, the several stages of the life cycle of tobacco. So the growing and curing, the product manicure, the distribution, transportation, the product consumption, so including second-hand and third-hand smoke exposure, and the last part, the post-consumption tobacco product waste disposal. And for that part, I will also talk about the cigarette butts. Next slide, please. So about the environmental impact, I just have, I'm putting here two figures which are, I think, quite clear. So if you look at the first figure and you look at the circle and you look at the top, you see so that there is 32.4 megaton of green tobacco leaf each year that has been produced across 125 countries. That leads to the 6.48 megatons of dry tobacco, which is then manufactured in 500 factories all over the world, leading to the 6 trillion cigarette stocks. But if you look on the left hand, you see all the resources that are needed to come to the production. And if you look at the right hand side, you look at all what is the output of the production. So I think it gives a very good overview of what the impact, the environmental impact actually is. If you look at the second graph, there it is explained the influence of the different parts of production and consumption process on categories of environmental impacts, such as climate change, agricultural land use, the toxicity, and water pollution. Next slide, please. So before getting into the sub-directive, so having now, well, actually, yeah, refreshed a bit your minds about the environmental impact of tobacco. And before getting into the sub-directive, it might be good to have a closer look at the policy logic of the European Union and the overall framework of the Green Deal. So the Green Deal was adopted in December 2019 by the European Commission, 100 days after the installation of the European Commission, presidented by Ursula von der Leyen. And the proposal is first and foremost a response to the ongoing climate crisis, but it also aims to address the environmental challenges related to biodiversity, pollution, and more. It underlines how action is needed in different sectors and across policies. So it's also a very important basis for the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. But the Green Deal isn't a law, but it will inspire for new legislation and follows up on existing initiatives. So that's important to recollect. So it's new legislation, but it's also making a package of the existing initiatives that were already taken. So with all the initiatives, you see mobilizing industry. Yeah, just go one, the present one. Yeah. So you see mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy. So that's the basis, actually, what comes after for the sub-directive. So that's the circular economy. And the idea is to transform the industrial sectors and to value the change. So to be ready in 2050, decisions and actions need to be taken during this commission period. So then the next slide. So out of one of the proposals that came out of the circular economy package that was adopted in 2015, we have the strategy on plastic, because across the world, plastics make up to 85% of beach litter. And plastics are even reaching citizens' lungs and dinner tables with microplastics in air, water, and food. And this has an unknown impact on health. So out of the plastic strategies, we have the sub-directive because it says, and that was the objective, to tackle the beach litter and the plastic soup, which is not only an EU problem, but of course an international problem. So the sub-directive has an environmental objective, so to reduce the impact of certain plastics on the environment, and in particular the aquatic environment and on human health. But as we are in the European Union, it also has, of course, an internal market objective, so to promote the transition to a circular economy, which is the other one. The preamble of the sub-directive clearly states that tobacco product filters containing plastic are the second most found single-use plastics items on beaches in the Union. So therefore, plastic, cigarette butts are part of the scope of the sub-directive. So next slide, please. So before going into the content of the sub-directive, we saw that the goal of the sub-directive is to tackle beach litter and the plastic soup. And the directive wants to make an end to the different disposable plastic items such as straws, cotton bud sticks, cutlery plates, stirrers, sticks for balloons, etc. So those items have been very much looked at in the media. Cigarettes butts was not an issue that was really tackled by the media, or much less, I think, than the cups and the food containers, etc., and the plastic bags, etc. As said also by Tom, it's several problems that we have with cigarette butts. Of course, it's the volume of the waste is a problem because up to 2/3 of every smoked cigarette is discarded on the ground. So that's between 340 and 680 million kilograms of tobacco product litters in the world each year. The toxicity, because the cigarette butts are toxic. They release the same toxic chemicals found in the cigarettes, such as arsenic, nicotine, in the environment. And the last one, of course, the butts are made of plastics. They are made of cellulose acetate, which is a synthetic plastic-like substance. So as mentioned before, the cellulose acetate do not biodegrade under most circumstances. But if they do, they fall out into microplastics, and then they can leach out of the sum of the 7,000 chemicals that are contained in a cigarette. So biodegraded and non-biodegraded, they cause a huge problem. Next slide, please. So then to the sub-directive, just to mention very shortly, of course, when we talk about tobacco products in the sub-directive, there is a reference to the Tobacco Products Directive. So it's the same definition. So we talk about the same things. A first issue that was tackled in the sub-directive is the marking requirements. So cigarettes and other tobacco products which have filters that contain plastic will need to bear a marking on their packaging to inform consumers of the presence of plastic and the harm done to the environment if the cigarette tubs are thrown away elsewhere than in the bin. So there have guidelines about this have been adopted in December of last year, and these markings will apply as of the 3rd of July of this year. Next slide, please. So this is the marking, so that has to be on the package of for cigarettes as of the 3rd of July of 2021. We had some discussion with NGOs talking about it. We are not very happy with this sentence, filter contains plastic, because it does not reflect the environmental impact of littering the filter, and it doesn't seem very convincing, I feel, to a consumer not to throw it away. It's the colors. It looks quite nice. I think you have to look very well to see what is actually meant with the drawing. And it does inform, of course, that the filter should not be thrown on the ground, but it doesn't inform in what bin or where it should be disposed of to get rid of the filter. Because the filters contain so much plastic that one should question actually in what bin should the cigarette butt then end at the end. And of course, that was not within the scope of the sub-directive, but the whole problem about the toxicity, of course, is not mentioned, or is not, the consumer is not made aware of that problem, of that environmental problem with this marking. So then next slide, please. A very important article is Article 8, so about the extended producer responsibility. First, what does it mean, extended producer responsibility? This is actually a concept that was introduced in the 90s of the last century. So it's an environmental policy approach in which a producer's responsibility for a product is extended to the post-consumer stage of a product's life cycle. EPR is typically understood to involve a shift in responsibility from governments or municipalities to producers, and as an encouragement of producers to take environmental considerations into account during the design and the manufacture phases of product development. What does this mean for the tobacco industry? So you see point A, B, and C. So the cost of the awareness raising measures referred to in Article 10 should be bared by the producer, the costs to clean up litter of the products and the transport and treatment, and the cost of data gathering and reporting. And then you have in an annex, so the specification that tobacco products are also part of the Article 8.3. Next slide, please. What do we think that we can expect from the tobacco industry, knowing that extended producer responsibility has to be implemented by all the 28 member states of the European Union by the 5th of January 2023? Is that we fear that they will downplay the costs of collection and waste management cost of the cigarette butts. And that's quite a fear also, because if you look further into the subdirective, you can see that the costs of collection of waste that are covered by the subdirective are only the costs of the collected butts in public collection systems. So all the butts that are not collected in public collection systems are not part of the subdirective. If you look more into the subdirective as well, you can see that for cigarette butts, the costs shall be established in a transparent way between all the actors concerned. So does this mean that it's all the actors, that also the tobacco industry will have a say in what the costs are actually like? It also says that the costs to clean up litter shall be limited to the activities undertaken by public authorities or on their behalf. So again, it's of course it's a major part, and it's very good that we have all the butts collected by public authorities. But of course, the public authorities are it goes broader than that. So we also fear that they will play the environmental impact of butts, that they will use the subdirective to connect with public authorities and NGOs, with environmental NGOs. We've heard about examples of that, for example, in Denmark. Of course, then 5.3 of the Framework Convention comes up. And we have been communicating the environmental departments about Article 5.3 and to say that it's also applicable for environmental legislation related to tobacco. And what you can see is that the tobacco industry is putting mostly the focus on individual responsibility of the smoker. So there is now an initiative, World No Trash, No Ashtray. That's an initiative by Philip Morris. And the part that you see in green is coming from their website. So you can see it's an issue for everyone. which is quite strange to me because it's the tobacco industry putting the blame on the smoker and say that it's the smoker and the citizens so active in all the cleanup actions that should solve the problem. And it's not apparently the tobacco industry who should tackle the problem at source and make sure that there will be less plastic in the environment. They also make promotion of portable pocket ashtrays, which we also feel is not the solution. And a lot, of course, about the financing. They finance a lot of awareness campaigns, as just mentioned, the new campaign of Philip Morris on the World No Ashtray campaign. So next slide, that will be my last one. What can we do? It's a very open question because I'm very curious about reactions of you and what you are doing in your respective country with the implementation of extended producer responsibility and the sub-directive. But we could consider to call collectively for a ban on cigarette butts. On the implementation of Article 8, we could include a collection target for the government to achieve. So this has been done, for example, for bottles and cans. So we could consider if you talk to your government, if you would like to ask to have a collection target also on cigarette butts. Ensure the collection of calculation of collection and waste management costs of butts. For me, a remaining question is actually what will be done with historical waste and what, for example, will be done by butts not collected via public collection systems. So make sure, and that's a reference to Article 5.3, make sure that tobacco industry is not involved in the setting up of eco-organisms in charge of the waste management systems, and nor should they be part of the supervisory or management bodies of these eco-organisms. So the tobacco industry can pay, but the management and the carrying out of the system should be done by independent parties that have no links with the tobacco industry. And inform the environmental ministries or departments of your respective country about Article 5.3, and that 5.3 is also applicable on tobacco-related environmental legislation. This call has come up also before by other speakers, so to exchange information on the implementation of extended producer responsibility, to cooperate with environmental NGOs. I think that's very important. Environmental NGOs have been working a lot of time with different waste streams on EPR, so they have a lot of knowledge about it, and they, as said, they don't see it maybe as the first problem, but when you explain it, they really recognize it. Usually they work on packaging, but of course they are very well aware and they about the tobacco butts. And I think between us, so that's actually the last point, is to exchange information between us about the implementation of extended producer responsibility in our member states. And just before doing the presentation, I thought that I forgot about one, and that's to raise awareness actually about the environmental impact of cigarette butts, because I think many people are not aware, and many organizations are not just more aware as they should be. And that would be all from my part, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Danielle. This was a wonderful and fulfilling presentation. Um, well, now I would like to ask all of our participants to ask any questions if they have any to our speakers. Okay. Uh, first, um, first question is coming from Claire, and I think it's mostly would be addressed to Danielle, is whether the EU will develop an implementing act on the EPR.
Yes, they will, but I understood from the information that I received, but it would be great if there would be other participants who could inform at their environmental ministry. But what I got from the one in Belgium is that they are not very very far in the development of these technical guidelines yet. There are still studies that have to be done by several governments, for example, to make sure how big the different waste streams are. So, for example, in Belgium, it's a regional competence. So environmental legislation is a regional competence, and they are actually counting butts, but over the 4 seasons. Due to COVID, there was a delay. So this study should come out in the summer. But of course, that is needed to, for example, to make sure how much money each municipality will get as a financing to collect cigarette butts. So yes, it will come, but as I understood from our ministry, it's not very far yet in its development.
Thank you very much. I hope this answer is clear for the participant who asked it. Secondly, I'm not sure, but I suppose that this question is addressed to Professor Novotny. And what impact do modified risk nicotine products such as IQOS or nicotine pouches have on the environment? Are they a step in the right direction or not?
Thanks for that. It's a very good question because our Environmental Protection Agency here in the U.S. has actually declared that e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, the discarded ones, should be considered toxic hazardous waste. And the reason for that is because of the nicotine, which is clearly a toxic hazardous waste product. This needs to be disposed of with special handling when it becomes a large enough quantity. And to give you an example of that being a problem, schools where here in the US, it's kids that are starting to smoke or to use electronic cigarettes. When schools confiscate these from the students and when they pick them up from the school grounds, from the yards, they then accumulate enough of a mass of these things that they become the hazardous waste generator, meaning, you know, when they get like a kilogram of these e-cigarette waste products or the confiscated ones, they then have to train, transport, store, and dispose of these products as hazardous waste. So yeah, they are a real challenge and becoming increasingly so. And it's important that they be treated and labeled as such, and there's no labeling, there's no advice about this disposal issue. And aside from the nicotine, aside from the chemistry, the lithium-ion batteries, which have been shown to explode, you know, you can't bring one of these on board in your packed luggage because of the risk of explosion in the cargo hold. They are one of the leading causes of fires in dumpsters, for instance. So lithium-ion batteries, whether they come from e-cigarettes or any other kind of product, are another major concern. And then, of course, the plastic, container or the, composition of the e-cigarettes are another issue.
Thank you very much, Professor. And the next question is as well addressed to you is, to what extent do you think it's important for tobacco to be discouraged in educational facilities?
I think some of our other speakers also made a big point about, the fact that people start smoking when they're in youthful ages. This is a pediatric problem. It's not usually something that adults take up tobacco use. Perhaps in some lower middle income countries, that's the case, but almost always it's in youthful areas. And so educational institutions are a place where you learn things, where you learn normative behavior. And if the normative behavior is tolerant of smoking, that's the wrong message. Here in the US, we've had a major effort, with national support and state support to ban smoking on all university campuses. And that's the case. It's not 100% adhered to, but when appropriate enforcement is in place, it really becomes a big deal. I started picking up cigarette butts on our campus every year around Earth Day. And every year we picked up about 20,000 butts in an hour with 50 students, which indicated how poorly people thought of their environment, but also how many people were smoking in opposition to the fact that there was a smoking ban on campus. So it takes enforcement as well.
Thank you. And the next question is as well for you, Professor, is what do you think about those new enterprises trying to recycle cigarette butts?
Is that for me again?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I don't think it's a good idea. I know that was actually considered in the EU plastics directive too, that if this product could be, if the product could be recycled, or also even if it were to be made into a biodegradable filter. None of that makes much sense to me, because the recycling is not going to produce products that people are going to want to have or want to use as consumers. It also requires them to be transported through the mails or some other sort of delivery device, meaning that people who are exposed to these things may actually need special protections. I don't know if anybody has picked up cigarette butts, but I think you can all realize how horrible they smell and exude, chemical toxins in the air even. And it's just not, I don't think, a practical solution. So I think the important thing is to go as far upstream as possible. And this is where banning the sale of filtered cigarettes for the plastics piece, and working intensively all across the globe on getting people to quit smoking, quit using tobacco.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? Well, if not, I would like to thank everybody who made it today to our wonderful webinar. I would like to thank, first of all, ENSP for providing us, and for the speakers, and for cooperating with us. As well as I would like to thank my O20 team who helped me to organize the event and to make this actually happen. And obviously, I would like to really thank our wonderful guest speakers who provided us today with a really interesting and fruitful information that we will definitely take away and think about in the future. I would like to promote our O20 website and Instagram for the either students, either not, to follow us, to cooperate with us. We're a young student organization who is looking for really progressional and futuristic partnerships.
Also, just a quick mention before the end. If you are interested in the ENSP activities, also, if you would like to join the youth group, you can find more information on our website. You can contact me directly or my colleagues. So yeah, thank you today, Fedor, also for great moderation. It was a great evening, and I hope we will see soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great evening.